There is a moment, barely noticeable, just before you open your eyes. A pause, a breath. And though the world hasn't said your name yet, life already has. You're here. But how often do we miss that? We tumble out of bed with the weight of everything unfinished still pressing on our chest. We reach for the phone before even reaching for ourselves. Notifications replace silence. Deadlines replace direction. And just like that, the miracle slips past again. You see, we've been taught to measure life in achievements, titles, urgent plans. But not once did they tell us that simply opening your eyes each morning is extraordinary. That breathing without effort is a grace. That being here still after everything is something sacred. Maybe no one ever told you that because they forgot too. Maybe no one ever stopped long enough to look you in the eyes and say, "You made it through the night," and that alone is enough for today. Because it is. You being here is not an accident. It never was. You didn't arrive at this moment untouched. You were carried here by heartbreaks that didn't destroy you, by sleepless nights you thought you wouldn't survive, by memories that still sting but didn't stop your breath. You were carried by your own resilience, sometimes silent, sometimes loud, but always faithful. And if no one's told you, lately let me be the one to remind you. You are a miracle, not because life is easy, but because you still choose to live it. There is something heroic about continuing when the world makes quitting seem so reasonable. There is something divine in soft eyes that still search for light even after years of shadows. And something quietly brave about getting out of bed when your heart feels too heavy to lift. So before you scroll, before you run, before the noise swallows you again, just pause. Let this be the morning you remember what most people forget. You don't have to earn your pee. You already belong. Life didn't ask you to prove your worth. It gave you a heart, a breath, a beginning. Let that be enough, even if just for now. We live like we have time. We push aside the phone call. We postpone the hug. We rush past the goodbye. There's always later, tomorrow, next time. But sometimes there isn't. You won't always know which moment is the last. That's the cruel grace of being alive. We are given no warnings, no countdowns, only presence, or the loss of it. I remember sitting across from my grandfather the week before he passed. His hands, once strong, trembled as he lifted his coffee. I kept checking my watch, thinking about a meeting I had that afternoon. I left too soon. I never saw him again. And it wasn't the funeral that broke me. It was the untouched coffee mug sitting on the kitchen table. The chair still pulled out. The silence in the room where he once existed so fully. That was the moment I learned that life is not lost in earthquakes or thunderclaps. It fades in the spaces we don't notice. It disappears in the seconds we rush past. It vanishes when we assume the people we love will always be there tomorrow. But life is not owed to us, and neither is time. The Stoics weren't being morbid. When they meditated on death, they were being present. They understood something we've forgotten in this age of distraction and noise, that fragility doesn't make life weaker. It makes it matter more. When you see the impermanence of things, not through fear, but through reverence, the ordinary becomes sacred. The evening walk you take without looking at the sky, that could have been a poem if only you'd looked up. The embrace you rush through on your way out the door, that could have been the warmth someone needed to hold on just a little longer. The quiet dinner with family phones, set-aside candles, lit laughter, unforced that's not mundane. That's holy. And it's so easy to forget, because we are conditioned to chase, to upgrade, to hustle for something out there, that we miss everything in here. But let me ask you something. You may not have dared to ask yourself, if this morning was the last sunrise you'd ever see, how would you spend it? Would you still rush? Would you still scroll? Would you still pick apart your flaws like they mattered more than your soul? Or would you slow down long enough to feel the sunlight touch your face? Would you hold someone longer, speak softer, breathe deeper? Because if you knew just how fragile it all really is, you would. You would make eye contact with the people you love like you were memorizing their face. You would laugh harder, cry louder, say the words that tremble inside you before silence steals the chance. The truth is, life doesn't wait, and it doesn't ask permission to change or to leave. So the only power we truly have is to notice while we're still here, to love while they're still here, to live as if every moment matters because it does. And maybe it's not about fearing death at all. Maybe it's about loving life so fiercely, so completely, that when death comes, it finds you grateful, not regretful, full, not empty, alive, not asleep. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it collapses onto the kitchen floor at midnight and still gets back up in the morning. Sometimes it looks like silence, the kind that's earned, not chosen. You won't always recognize your strength when it arrives. It doesn't wear armor or speak in certainty. It often shows up looking like surrender, but it isn't. It's what happens when life breaks you open and you realize you're still here, still breathing, still trying, still moving towards something even if you can't name it yet. There's this story I once heard. A woman in her mid-30s lost her job, her relationship, and her apartment all within the same month. She used to be the kind of person who always had a plan, always 5 steps ahead. But suddenly her map was gone. Her compass broken. She told me I stopped recognizing the sound of my own laughter. So she left. Not to escape, but to remember. She moved to a quieter place, started walking each morning without music, without distraction. She said it was agonizing at first, the silence, the space, the not knowing. But something happened in that emptiness. She began to notice things again. The sound of her own footsteps, the way the trees whispered at dawn. The ache in her chest turned into something else, something softer. Not peace exactly, but permission. Permission to begin again. To build a life not out of plans, but out of presence. That woman now says losing everything was what gave her back everything that mattered. She's not the same person she was before. She's slower now, gentler, but somehow stronger too, in that quiet, grounded way. This is the kind of strength Stoic philosophy reveres. Not bravado, not invincibility, but endurance, grace, the ability to remain rooted even when the storm rages inside. Real strength is not forged in comfort. It's born in adversity. When the job falls through, when the diagnosis comes, when the betrayal slices through trust, that's when your soul is asked a question: will you collapse into despair? Or will you stretch? You might bend so far you don't recognize yourself. But if you do not break, if you let the winds of pain sculpt you instead of shatter you, you become something deeper, wiser, stronger than before. You stop being afraid of falling because you've already fallen and you've stood back up. And that is not weakness. That is transformation. Think of the people you admire most, the ones whose presence steadies a room, the ones who don't need to speak loudly to be heard. They weren't born that way. They were shaped. They were carved out by grief, by failure, by loss, and they let those wounds teach them. They let the silence grow them. They let the pain baptize them into something unshakable. That's what it means to be truly strong. Not that you don't feel pain, but that you feel it fully and you keep going anyway. Not that you never fall, but that you rise and rise again with more compassion each time. Not that you are untouched, but that you are alive and more deeply human because of it. So if you're in a season right now where everything feels like it's crumbling, I won't tell you to be strong in the way the world defines it. I'll tell you to let it break you open. Let it strip away what you thought you needed. Let it teach you to breathe again, not with your lungs, but with your soul. Because what remains when the dust settles will be real, and you will recognize yourself not by who you were, but by the courage you found when you thought you had none left. You are never just you. Even in your loneliest hour, you have never walked alone. There are footsteps inside your footsteps, whispers buried in your heartbeat, and every breath you take carries the echo of 1,000 others who breathed so you could. This truth is easy to forget because the world teaches you to see yourself as separate and individual, a self-made story. But that's not the whole truth. You are not the beginning. You are a continuation. You are the laughter of your grandmother who braided your mother's hair, even when her fingers ached from long days in the fields. You are the prayer whispered by a great-grandfather you've never met spoken through cracked lips as war surrounded his village. You are the courage of someone who crossed oceans with nothing but a name and a hunger for survival. You are the lullaby sung in a language you don't speak, still humming in your soul. All of that lives in you. And maybe no one ever told you that before. Maybe they were too busy surviving to remind you that you come from people who didn't give up, not when the crops failed, not when the sky went quiet, not when love broke or governments fell. They stayed. They held on. They made a way. And you're their way. There is strength in that knowing. Not a loud, boastful strength, but a quiet spine of steel that runs through your back when you think you can't go on. That voice that rises when you're on your knees. That's them. That last ounce of willpower when your body is weak, but your spirit says, keep going. That's them. When you choose patience over rage, love over fear, truth over comfort, you're not just doing it for yourself. You're honoring them. You're saying your suffering was not in vain. I carry you with me still. There's something sacred about realizing your pain is not isolated, that your struggle is not just yours. It is part of a river that's been flowing long before you got here. When you fall and rise again, you are rising not just as yourself, but as an answer to prayers whispered long ago. When you choose to heal, to speak gently, to keep showing up, you are extending their legacy. So the next time you feel like you're falling short, like you don't matter, like your life is somehow small, pause. Think of the hands that held tools so yours could hold books. Think of the backs that bent so yours could stand upright. Think of the nights they didn't sleep so you could dream. You are not alone. You were never alone. The courage that helped them survive lives in your lungs. The grace that helped them forgive lives in your chest. the love that refused to die even when the world gave them every reason to stop lives in your blood. And you honor them not by being perfect, but by continuing, by breathing fully, by living slowly, by choosing to be present in a life they only dreamed of. Your heartbeat is a thank you. Your laughter is a remembrance. Your persistence is a song echoing across generations. So walk on, not just for yourself, but for them, because every step you take in truth and tenderness makes their journey mean something. You don't need a mountain to feel awe. You don't need fireworks or applause or life-changing news. Sometimes the miracle is the way the sunlight falls through the window onto the floor. Sometimes it's the warmth of a chipped mug in your hands, steam rising like a quiet offering. Sometimes it's the voice on the other end of the phone saying, "I'm glad you called." We are trained to overlook these things, to believe that meaning must be large, that joy must be loud, that purpose must be proven. But what if the greatest truths are not waiting at the end of some achievement? What if they're already here, woven into the fabric of our ordinary days? You've been taught to aim high, to keep going, to never settle, and there's beauty in that hunger. But if you're not careful, it can starve your soul. Because while you chase something out there, you miss everything right here. The smell of rain on concrete, the way someone you love looks at you when you're not trying to impress them, the sound of laughter echoing through a hallway, the stillness that lives between two people who no longer need words. These are not background details. These are the story. The Stoics understood this, that to live wisely is not to wait for life to impress you, but to learn how to be impressed by life itself, to let a simple breeze remind you that you're alive, to pause long enough during a meal to actually taste it, not just consume it, to speak less sometimes and listen more, not for information, but for connection. You don't need to escape your life to find peace. You just need to see it differently. When you begin to notice again, really notice, even the most ordinary routines become sacred rituals. Brushing your teeth becomes an act of self-respect. Walking the dog becomes a way to talk with the sky. Washing the dishes becomes a meditation in movement and sound. And when you miss someone, even the ache becomes a kind of proof that love once bloomed there. Even sorrow, when held gently, becomes its own kind of prayer. You see, life doesn't wait until you're ready. It doesn't pause until you've healed or figured everything out. It keeps offering moments, small, fragile, fleeting, like petals on a breeze. And most of the time, we are too busy rehearsing the past or predicting the future to catch them. But you can choose differently. You can return to your life not as something to conquer, but something to behold. You can walk slower, breathe deeper, speak softer, not because everything is perfect, but because even with all its flaws, life is still miraculous, and no one, not even you, is promised more time. So if this is the only evening you get to sit with your loved one at the dinner table, let it be enough. If this is the last time your child says, "I love you" before bed, let your heart be wide open when you hear it. If this moment, this small, ordinary moment, is the only one you truly have, receive it fully, because the sacred is never far away. It's in the space between words, in the breath between heartbeats, in the moments the world deems too simple to matter. But you know better now. And because you do, nothing is small anymore. There is a companion that walks with you from the day you are born. It doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It waits patiently, quietly, just outside the edge of your awareness. And though we are taught to fear it, to deny it, to speak of it only in whispers, death is not here to steal your joy. It's here to deepen it. We live in a world that hides death behind sterile walls and polite silences. We pretend it's far away, something reserved for later. But death is not later. It is now, not in its arrival, but in its reminder. And the reminder is this: you will not live forever, and neither will the people you love. That truth could crush you, or it could set you free. Because when you remember that time is limited, you stop wasting it on things that don't matter. You stop holding grudges like trophies. You stop chasing perfection as if it's love. You stop saying someday like it's a guarantee. Death invites you to become intimate with now. To call your mother not next week, but tonight. To say I forgive you before the silence hardens. To take the trip, write the poem, hold the hand while you still can. You begin to understand that the argument you were clinging to isn't worth the distance it creates, that the bitterness you've carried has poisoned more mornings than it ever protected, that your pride, while noble in theory, might be blocking the very love you ache for. And suddenly ordinary days don't feel so ordinary anymore. You notice the way your partner's hand fits perfectly into yours, the way your child mispronounces a word in the most beautiful way, the way your own breath, steady soft, is the most reliable miracle you'll ever know. It's not about living in fear of death. It's about letting death teach you how to live. Because if you knew today was your last day, would you still spend it proving your point in a fight that doesn't matter? Would you still scroll past the moment instead of stepping into it? Would you still judge your body, your home, your life, instead of blessing it? The Stoics didn't speak of death to depress us. They spoke of it to wake us up. Because when you truly remember that everything ends, you begin. You begin to write love letters again. You begin to show up without your armor. You begin to live like your days are numbered because they are. And that awareness doesn't make life smaller. It makes it sacred. It means that every goodbye deserves your full attention. That every sunrise deserves your awe. That every breath you take is borrowed, and the only proper response is gratitude. There will come a day when your name is spoken for the last time, when your voice becomes memory, when your life is no longer yours to live, but only yours to have lived. And when that day comes, may you not look back with regret. May you look back with softness in your heart, with stories that matter, with love that endured, with forgiveness that was given freely, with moments, countless moments, where you chose to be here, fully, tenderly, bravely, because death in all its finality is not the enemy. The real tragedy is never having lived at all. You've heard the word miracle so many times that it's started to lose its weight. It's been tangled in fairy tales and Sunday sermons, in the stories of other people, not yours. So you forget. You forget that the miracle is you, not the perfect version, not the someday you when everything makes sense and the pain is gone, but the you right now, with the tangled thoughts, with the unanswered questions, with the quiet ache you carry like an old song you can't quite name. Yes, even this version, especially this version. You don't need a spotlight to prove your existence matters. You don't need applause to confirm you've done enough. The very fact that you have survived through the nights, no one saw the doubts, no one heard the heaviness, no one could hold for you, is proof. You are still here, still breathing, still opening your eyes to a world that hasn't always been kind. And that is a miracle. You are not the sum of your productivity. You are not defined by your setbacks or your pace. You are a mosaic of stories, of resilience, of vulnerability, of quiet moments where you chose to keep going when stopping would have been easier. The world doesn't always recognize that kind of strength. It's too quiet, too invisible, but that doesn't make it any less real. Because you are the answer to prayers whispered in languages you'll never speak. You are the result of choices made by people whose names are not written in books, but whose courage is written in your blood. You are the continuation of lives that refuse to give up. And every time you choose to show up, not with perfection, but with presence, you honor them. You are the proof that healing is possible even in the absence of clarity. You are the proof that love can rise even after loss. You are the proof that broken things can still sing. So stop waiting to feel worthy. You already are. Not because you did something to earn it, but because you exist. Because you woke up this morning. Because your heart, fragile and brave, still beats. Let that be enough. Let your existence, raw, unfinished, gloriously human, be your offering. You don't need to become something else to deserve peace. You don't need to fix every flaw before you're allowed to rest. You don't need to reach some invisible milestone before you begin to cherish your life. The miracle is not in what you do. It's in who you are. And who you are is already whole, already holy, already more than enough. So breathe. Not to rush, not to fix, just to remember that this moment is yours, that this breath is borrowed, that this life is sacred. And you, exactly as you are the living proof that miracles do not belong only to ancient stories. They are here, now, in you. You don't need to change your entire life to begin again. You don't need a grand revelation. You just need to pause long enough to ask, what am I really doing with this moment? Not in judgment, not with shame, but with gentle honesty. Because the truth is, most of us are not living. We are reacting. Reacting to emails, to expectations, to other people's noise, other people's timelines, other people's versions of success. And when you live in reaction, you forget your original rhythm. You forget what peace feels like when it's not interrupted by pressure. You forget that life can be lived, not just managed. But there is another way, a slower, deeper, truer way. And it begins with intention. Not the kind that comes with bullet journals or vision boards, though those can help. I mean the kind of intention that lives in the space between your breaths. The kind that asks before you speak, is this true? That asks before you act, is this loving? That asks before you move, is this aligned? When you start to live this way, something inside you shifts. The noise doesn't disappear, but it no longer controls your steps. You move from reflex to reverence. You begin to notice the small choices, how you greet the day, how you speak to yourself in the mirror, how you listen not just to words, but to what lives beneath them. And in those small choices, something sacred happens. You begin to reclaim your life, not from others, from forgetfulness. Because most people don't lose their lives to catastrophe. They lose it in the slow erosion of presence. in the mornings rushed, in the joy postponed, in the love withheld because it's not the right time. But there is no right time to live. There is only now. So what if you began treating your life as the sacred trust that it is? What if every day became a quiet ceremony, not one of perfection, but of presence, of returning to yourself again and again, even after you wander? The Stoics spoke of living with virtue not as performance, but as a compass, a way of aligning the inner world with the outer one, of choosing values not based on trend, but on truth, gratitude, courage, kindness. These are not lofty ideals. They are daily choices, quiet, powerful, and within reach. Every time you forgive instead of hardening, every time you listen instead of interrupting, every time you rest instead of pushing, you are living intentionally. You are saying to the world, I am not here to race. I am here to live. And that is no small thing. Because in a culture that worships speed and spectacle, choosing presence is rebellion. It is resistance. It is the most radical kind of love, the love that refuses to abandon this moment. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to remember again and again to come home to yourself, to return to your breath, to move from reaction to response, from autopilot to awareness. And when you do, your life begins to soften, not because it becomes easier, but because you become rooted in your truth, rooted in your values, rooted in the quiet understanding that your life lived with intention is already enough. Gratitude is not a mood. It's not reserved for when things go well or when blessings overflow. Gratitude is a way of seeing, a way of standing even when the ground is trembling beneath you. When life is good, gratitude softens your heart. When life is hard, gratitude steadies your soul. And when life is uncertain, which it so often is, gratitude becomes your anchor. Not because it erases pain, but because it roots you in what is still good, still true, still here. You don't have to feel grateful for everything. You just have to feel grateful in everything. There's a difference. You don't have to pretend the heartbreak didn't hurt. You don't have to minimize the disappointment, the failure, the ache. But even in the middle of it, you can say, yes, this hurts. And still, I am thankful for the breath that carries me through it. That's not delusion, that's wisdom. Because gratitude doesn't deny reality, it reframes it. It reminds you that pain is not the only truth. That loss is not the only voice in the room. There's also the sound of your friend's laugh, the comfort of clean sheets, the quiet mercy of your own heartbeat, steady, faithful, asking nothing in return. And when you begin to notice those things, not as background, but as blessings, your life begins to change. Not because the world outside has softened, but because the world inside you has awakened. Gratitude is not naive. It knows that life is hard, that people leave, that dreams break. But it also knows that even then, there is beauty. There is always beauty in the way you keep showing up, in the way strangers hold the door open, in the way the moon still rises soft and whole, even when the day has taken everything from you. Gratitude doesn't ask you to ignore your wounds. It asks you to hold them with tenderness, to let them teach you, to let them open your eyes to the miracle of what still remains. Because no matter how far you've fallen, there is still someone worth loving. And sometimes that someone is you. The Stoics understood this. They knew that contentment wasn't found in more, but in enough. And enough is rarely what you expected. It's often what you already have. A roof, a warm meal, a name spoken with care, a memory that still brings you to tears, a future you haven't given up on. That's enough. And when you live from that place, from enough, you become unshakable. Not because storms don't come, but because your roots go deep. Deep into awareness, deep into presence, deep into the knowing that life owes you nothing, and yet still gives you everything. So let your gratitude be messy. Let it be honest. Let it rise from the cracks, not just the peaks. Be thankful for the things you once prayed for and the strength you found when they didn't arrive. Be thankful for the yes and the no, for the doors that opened and the ones that slammed shut, because each one shaped you. Each one led you here, to this breath, to this moment, to this life still unfolding. Gratitude is not a feeling. It is a posture. It is the way you bow, not because life is easy, but because it is sacred. And when you bow like that, when your life becomes a quiet thank you, even the storms begin to feel like prayers. You may not remember the first time someone loved you into survival. It may have been a hand that held yours before you could walk, a lullaby sung to you in a half-lit room, a meal placed in front of you without fanfare, a prayer whispered at the edge of someone else's exhaustion, asking the universe to be kind to you. And maybe, just maybe, you are the answer to that prayer. Have you ever thought of that your life exactly as it is now, bruised, unfinished, achingly human, might be the very thing someone once begged heaven for? Maybe you were the dream in the heart of a grandmother who never saw freedom in her lifetime. Maybe your voice is the echo of a man who died with courage on his tongue and hope in his bones. Maybe your gentleness is the redemption of generations that never had the chance to be soft. We don't talk about this kind of legacy enough. The one that lives quietly, the one that isn't built on fame or fortune, but on faith, on survival, on the invisible threads of love and endurance that pull us forward even when we don't know why we're still standing. But you are standing. You are breathing. You are choosing again and again not to numb out, not to shut down, not to disappear, even on the days when it would be so much easier to do so. And that is legacy, not the kind you'll find carved into marble or etched into history books, but the kind that lives in eyes that soften when they meet yours. In the child you encourage without even knowing it. In the friend who says, "Because of you, I didn't give up today." You are leaving something behind every day, not someday, now. In the way you show up, in the way you listen, in the way you tell the truth gently and love fiercely and let others be fully themselves in your presence. You are not just a name. You are not just a role. You are not just a body moving through time. You are a living message, a bridge between what came before and what comes next. And when you live with that awareness, not with pressure, but with reverence, you begin to make different choices. You begin to realize that kindness matters more than being right, that forgiveness is a kind of freedom. That legacy is not some far-off destination. It is the footprint you leave behind with every word you speak, every heart you touch, every time you choose love over fear. So what will your life say when you are no longer here to speak it? Will it say, "I survived and passed on strength"? Will it say, "I was broken, but I kept loving anyway"? Will it say, "I was afraid, but I showed up"? Because that is a story worth telling, a legacy worth carrying, a miracle worth continuing. So breathe deeply, not just for yourself, but for every soul who never had the chance. Live slowly, not to fall behind, but to honor the path that brought you here. And love bravely, not because it's easy, but because it's the one thing death can never erase. You are not the end of the story. You are the prayer still unfolding, still answering, still becoming. And long after your name is spoken, for the last time, your love will remain. Your kindness will linger, and your life, however quiet, however ordinary, will have mattered more than you'll ever fully know. Because you were the miracle all along.